Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video, I am going to be discussing last night's game between the New Orleans Pelicans and the Phoenix Suns. And I think that in the case of the Pelicans, there's a chance that we look back on this game as a real turning point in the season for the Pels. Now, why would I say that? Well, I think this is the best win that they have had all year. Now, that may come as a bit of a surprise considering that they beat a team that I think most people, myself included, would consider to be a Tier 1 championship contender in the Milwaukee Bucks. But the reason why they won that game was because of some fluky three-point shooting in which they really struggled to hang on to their lead and almost blew it in the fourth quarter. But in this game, yeah, they shot the ball well from three. They made 14 of their 33 three-point attempts, which is a 42.4% rate. But that's not why they won this game. They won this game because in the second half, they allowed Zion Williamson to handle the ball a lot more. And that's something that a lot of people have been clamoring for. Zion is a guy who has a pretty solid handle considering his size, and with his burst and athleticism and strength, he's able to score at a high level off of the bounce. And in this game, it felt like Stan Van Gundy embraced that and let Zion have the ball in his hands more than any other time that I can remember as long as Zion has been in his Pelicans uniform. In that second half, they were running inverted pick and rolls and situations where Zion was in isolation and getting the ball to him in post-up opportunities so that he was able to kick the ball out to shooters, and he made a few really nice passing reads. Zion finished this game with 28, 7, and 6 on 12 for 14 shooting, and although that isn't the best stat line he's had this season, this was the best that I can remember ever seeing Zion play, at least since he was at Duke. He was scoring at such a high level and making great reads out of situations where he had open teammates. The defense was bad. Like, there were a few situations where he got absolutely lost and his guy was wide open for three, and he looked like my grandma closing out on the guy on the perimeter. But on offense, like, this is the most special I've ever seen Zion play, and it gets me really excited for this Pelicans team. I hope that Stan Van Gundy has a catharsis of sorts in which he realizes that, yeah, if we give the ball to this guy more often, there's a chance that we get these kind of returns, and that's going to give us a very real shot to contend. So with that being said, I mean, like, the Pelicans scored 48 points in the first half, and we're probably pretty lucky to be ahead of a Suns team that had not shot the ball well at all from three-point range. But then in the second half, they exploded for a 75-point half, and I'm attributing a lot of that to the change in offensive philosophy with Zion handling the ball a whole lot more often. So, assuming that this is something that we see more consistently, assuming that this is an identity that the Pelicans are comfortable adopting, then the question becomes, who are the pieces that you surround Zion with for the future? Brandon Ingram made an all-star team last year, and he's right on the borderline of making his second consecutive team in this season. So I think that there's no way you can get rid of him. You could also make a very real argument that he's a better player than Zion at this point in his career, although I'm sure that once we get a little bit further into these two guys' careers as Pelicans, we'll start to see Zion gap Ingram a little bit. But Ingram is clearly a keeper. Outside of that, I'm not really sure if there is anyone else that I'm absolutely in love with. I'm a big fan of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and I think that he's great as a secondary playmaker, but is he someone that I think is the best option as a starting one next to these two guys? I'm not sure I trust his jump shot enough to say that. Lonzo Ball has been in a lot of trade rumors recently, and I think that I like his fit alongside Zion and BI a lot more than I do with some of the other players on this roster, namely Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams. But because those two guys are on this team and they're probably going to be on it long term, this is probably a spot where Lonzo needs to be moved on from. Now, I think that I'm a bigger Lonzo fan than the general consensus. I still believe that he has a chance to cement himself as a very high-level role player who is a terrific passer, capable of doing some stuff as a slasher, an average three-point shooter, and a very high-level defensive player. That right there is someone who can be a top 50-ish guy in the NBA and can be a fourth or perhaps even third best player on a championship contending team. So with that being said, if I were a rebuilding team looking to add another high-level playmaker, Lonzo would be a guy that I would be very interested in acquiring. The two teams that really stand out to me are the Chicago Bulls and the New York Knicks. And if I were those two teams, I would really be phoning David Griffin and seeing what he would want for Lonzo Ball. If the Pelicans think that they can make it work with Lonzo and that this relationship isn't completely fractured, then I'm absolutely in favor of them hanging on to him. I think that having another guy who can really handle it and is at least okay at shooting. I mean, yeah, I get that he's been bad to open up this year, but I think that I trust him to be like a 37% shooter for the rest of his career like he was last year. So I think that plus the defense is a good fit with Zion and BI. So I'd like to hang on to Lonzo, but there's a chance that it just doesn't work out in New Orleans and he's got to move on. Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams don't fit this roster the best. Bledsoe is actually a player that I really like, and it was hard for me to see him go from the Bucks, no matter how much hate I gave him for his playoff struggles. I like Eric Bledsoe as a player, and I think that his ability as a very strong point of attack defender can really help a team out. I'm not sure that his lack of floor spacing is going to help out the Pelicans, but there's a chance that he is a starting point guard for the future with them. But Steven Adams really overlaps with Zion in a lot of ways, both on the defensive end, where they're both probably best off as rim protectors, and on the offensive end, when they're both best in the paint. So if there's a way they could move off of that Steven Adams contract, I would be very much in favor, but due to the fact that they just extended him, I think that that's probably pretty unlikely. I mean, Adams had a solid game, and he's played decent. Like, he had a double-double tonight, but it's not like he stood out at all. So there's a lot of interesting decisions that need to be made with this Pelicans team. Overall, though, it appears to me that they're starting to find an identity with Zion having the ball in his hands a bit more. And I think that that is a very real strategy that they should use more frequently, and it would give them a better chance to make a run at the playoffs this season than I otherwise would have thought that they would have had. Moving on to the Phoenix Suns. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on the Suns, check out a video that I put out last week. I think it was called something like discussing the NBA's most interesting team, the Phoenix Suns. I really dove deep into this squad and gave a lot of my thoughts. But in this game, they really did not get a whole lot out of their two young wings in Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, the two players who have averaged upwards of 25 points per game combined so far this season on pretty good efficiency. Scored just 16 points on 7 for 21 shooting in this game. And when that happens, Chris Paul needs to look to be more aggressive as a scorer in the offense, and he took 7 shots in this game. So that's not a way for this team to win. They ended up leaning too heavily on Devin Booker. He couldn't get his shots to fall. I mean, he finished with 25 points on 9 for 20 shooting, but he didn't make a 3. It felt like he shot much worse than 45% in this game. And he just needed more help if they were going to be able to beat this New Orleans team that was firing on all cylinders offensively. DeAndre Ayton also needs to be more aggressive. He had 13 and 11 on 6 for 9 shooting, so it's not like he had a bad game, but I'd like to see him take more than 9 shots. I think that with how big he is and how strong he is, there's certainly more opportunities for him to score than just that. So Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton needed to step up and score a bit more when Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges were struggling to score. But a lot of this can also fall on the bench. I think the Suns have one of the better benches in the NBA, but with Cam Payne being out, and he's the guy that they really rely upon to create good shots for them, and Dario Saric being out as someone who can give them really solid minutes at the backup five, they've become over-reliant on Frank Kaminsky to play that backup big man position, and on players like Langston Galloway and Etuan Moore, who are really good bench players who can knock down shots, but aren't really the shot creator that Cam Payne is. So they need those two guys to get healthy, and once they do, I think it'll help out the Suns team quite a bit. But just the mentality that DeAndre Ayton and Chris Paul played with tonight was not terrific, and it's something that I'd like to see them improve upon. Overall, this was a fun game. This was the best that I've seen the Pelicans played all year, and it's what I wanted from them when I saw that they were going to be on national TV 3 times per week for this season. That's only a slight exaggeration. So, I think that I have discussed everything that I was planning on. So, I'll remind you one last time to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this game. That's going to be it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all again very soon.